There was an anniversary on the calendar this week that went by largely unnoticed. March 23rd was the 90th anniversary of the Enabling Act in Germany. That's when Hitler was the leader of a minority government, meaning his National Socialists made up less than 50% of the parliament, the Reichstag. Needed cooperation from the other non-Nazi parties on the political right, and the non-Nazi president of Germany, von Hindenburg, to stay in office and to pass laws. And so, in the wake of the Reichstag fire in late February, the Nazis had a big propaganda push to claim, falsely it seems, that this was all part of a communist plot to take over Germany, and stoking fear and whipping the populace into the frenzy helped allow them to quell dissent and pass a law, the Enabling Act, that essentially made Hitler a dictator, meaning that it allowed the cabinet, which responded to just the Chancellor, Hitler, to pass laws without the consent of the Reichstag, without the consent of the President, von Hindenburg, and even if they were unconstitutional, even if they're against the Weimar German Constitution. So that's the moment. They had a vote, and they voted dictatorial powers to Hitler, and there are a lot of off-ramps in the march from 1933 to war and Shoah. But I really think March 23rd, 1933, 90 years ago, the Enabling Act is the big off-ramp. That moment of using democratic-ish means to approve a law ending democracy is a signal warning. We're coming up on Passover. Passover, we remember how Jews were brutalized by an absolute monarch, by Pharaoh, a tyrant, who had advisors but was free to ignore them. And how leaving for the Promised Land, the Israelites first would have no set leader. They lived with the period of the Judges without a king. And then once the Israelites had a king, they had checks and balances. They had a divided government. The king ruled politically. The prophet could hold the king morally to account. The prophet had no temporal power, but answered only to God. And the priest, the Kohanim, couldn't be king, but controlled the religious, that central aspect of the country, and the king couldn't control the religious aspect of the nation. There was a check and balance across the society. Jews and other minorities, by the way, have done best in situations where there are checks and balances, where the tyranny of the majority is not allowed to take full flower, or at least can be paused, slowed down. We live in an age where this can be forgotten. Checks and balances, and not assigning too much power to any one group is essential to preserve minority rights. That's when the most people can flourish. As we approach Passover, we should remember this. Remember the mistakes of the past. Look at the possible mistakes of the present. I'm not calling anyone a Nazi, by the way. I don't think there are all that many Nazis around right now. It's just a warning and an anniversary, and we're supposed to remember our history. That's part of the mitzvot. We should focus on this as we move into the Passover season so that we can move into a time of our liberation and preserve that liberation. Shabbat Shalom.